The New York Jets search for a brand new general manager is well underway, and we're going to talk about some of the candidates that were thrown out there today by The Athletic and Zach Rosenblatt. Going to cover some of our previous draft busts and kind of poke some fun at ourselves, and go over some of the performances from this past Sunday, primarily the rookie running backs. I'm Glenn Naughton with JetNation Radio, JetNation.com. Be sure to log into JetNation.com where you can register and become a part of what is the most active Jets message board on the web, which, by the way, I wanted to throw this out there. I think we're going to kick off every week with a topic on the JetNation message boards that we think is doing well, that's getting some traction, that has people talking, hot topics, or, however you want to describe it. One that I like, Dylan, I checked out because it's a name that's getting kicked around an awful lot now and made me somewhat rethink. I've said many times, I think because this is an inept failure of an organization, failed owner, no one's going to want to come work here, is my take. However, I'm kind of thinking that this guy, and this is who the thread is about, somebody saying, is Aaron Glenn a shoo-in? Former Jets corner. Is he a shoo-in to get this job? Now, I don't want to say he's a shoo-in, but if you're talking about high-caliber candidates, like really quality guys who will be in demand, Aaron Glenn is the only one I can think of that would want to be here. Rich Cimini has said as much recently on his podcast that Aaron Glenn told him a couple of years ago that the Jets would be a dream job for him. Now, he is the Lions defensive coordinator. He worked with the Saints. He has stayed in touch with Bill Parcells over the years. Despite losing a lot of his best players on defense this year, the Detroit Lions defense has been absolutely fantastic. So the poster on the thread, Pep, he says the Jets have to be realistic with their, and this whole first paragraph I agree with. So good job here by Pep. The Jets have to be realistic with their coaching search. A lot of the top candidates will simply not want to come here. I agree. Can't look like I don't have scientific data, but I know that, or I don't believe there's a world in which candidates are going to be lining up to come work for this organization. A lot of people are advocating for Vrabel. I'd have no problem with that. A lot of people are advocating for Monken, my top choice, which Pep's. This first paragraph almost reads as if I wrote it. Monken would be his top choice, but I doubt he would take the job. Wholly agree. Forget about Ben Johnson. Wholly agree. Kingsbury, Flores, they're maybes. But he says one guy not being talked about as much as he should be is Aaron Glenn, defensive guy, which a lot of Jets fans don't want. I think that's what they're going to get. But in terms of being a leader, disciplinarian, which is what this team needs, it'd be basically a home run hire or a very good hire, is what Pep is saying. I tend to agree. Dylan, what are your thoughts on that take? You're muted.
Muted after all that. No, I think Aaron Glenn is certainly deserved of being a head coach. I think for all of the allure around Ben Johnson, you also need to look at the other side of the ball and what Aaron Glenn has done. Will Parkinson posted a video of Aaron Glenn from 2022 speaking to the locker room, and it's just a different vibe than what we've had for so many years. He went around the room to a couple guys and he's like, "Where did you go to college? What was your record then? And so we're not used to losing here, right? And like, this is not going to make us be who we are as a losing franchise." And this is when they were, I think it was 3-13, or like in the 0-5 stretch of that season where they started turning it around. And it just felt so different than the Eagles and Crows and whatever the heck Saul was talking about on Hard Knocks that we heard that was just kind of obnoxious at this point. But yeah, and then so I think he's deserved, and I think he's up there in terms of my candidates. He's number 5. So I have obviously Ben Johnson, which I think is like the untouchable, probably not going to come here. And after the reports, like, do we even want him if he's going to say, hey, your franchise needs to look in the mirror, figure out what it's going to do wrong or what it has done wrong, and then fix all those things before I can even agree to come here? I don't know. It sounds like, one, the Jets aren't capable of doing that, but two, it doesn't sound like a fit. And then it's Todd Monken, who we've talked at length about how much we'd like him with his offensive mind. And then it's Vrabel, Joe Brady, and Aaron Glenn. So he fits right there. You said it. We don't really want a defensive guy, or most Jets fans don't. I don't really mind either way, but I think when you start looking at the list of guys, the retread defensive hires or the defensive-minded guys attract me a lot more than the offensive-minded guys. Like, if you told me Liam Cohen or Aaron Glenn. I think that's such a toss-up, and I'd probably lean Aaron Glenn. Like, he just has more merit to me than Liam Cohen does. And I know Liam Cohen has a good history with the McVay tree, and then he went to Kentucky, and now he's with Tampa Bay doing good things with Baker. But I don't know. Aaron Glenn, to me, it's a really good candidate, in my opinion. He's, like I said, top 5. So I would have no problem with it. I think the next question is, who is your offensive mind? Who comes with you? Maybe not necessarily from Detroit, but he's from the Saints, and I think one other team before as a DB coach. So he has ties around the league. So, like, who is that offensive guy you bring with you? And I think that's when you can start moving him higher up on the list. Once you know, okay, I feel like Saleh was my top guy because we knew he was getting LaFleur or Mike McDaniel. And that was what attracted me to Saleh over Wink Martindale, who was my number 2 guy. And I think once you see the pieces of the defensive mind plus the offensive guy he's bringing with you, it's easier to get around. Now, I'll push back a little bit. We just said people aren't lining up for the Jets job. Rich Cimini has already said now Aaron Glenn, Mike Vrabel is open to the job. There's guys that are open to this job, and I would consider both of those guys top candidates if you looked around the league. So maybe it's not as terrible as we think. Maybe
with Brady, he's saying he would listen. I think people will listen in case Woody says, "Look, I'm desperate. Here's $15 million." Okay, I'll take your job.
Yeah, that's true.
That's true. Glenn is the only guy, and I get what you're saying, but
if Woody gets a GM that Vrabel likes, and he said, "Hey, I can agree with this philosophy. I butted heads with John Robinson in Tennessee, and that's kind of why things fell apart after he traded AJ Brown and things went awry." So if he's on the same page with the GM, I think that obviously helps, but he's a top candidate in my opinion. So it's nice to hear that Glenn and him would at least be open to it. Like, Glenn says it's a dream job. Like, that almost makes me I'm sure it's not always first and don't let you leave type thing.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not always the case, but I always tend to think, and that was one thing with Aaron Glenn when his name started getting kicked around. I didn't even want to talk about it because I'm like, we don't need defense again. But there's the party that when you do think about it, you say, well, maybe the ties to the team, the history with the team, having never won here, and wanting to, perhaps that's, a reason that he does it. But here's the thing. And here's what Justin Jett says. Don't want Glenn, sick of crappy offense. Keep getting offensive head coach until one works out. Well, let's focus on the next one first. Let's not worry about who the next 6 coaches will be. We have another couple of years till those guys get hired. But listen, I get it. Look, I loved Aaron Glenn as a player. He's sort of one of the first great Jets that I saw the team draft and develop, who had a lot of success with the team. But there's that part of me, as I watch all these teams across the league have all this success on offense, that whether it's Minnesota or the Rams or, all these teams with these young offensive coaches, and there are others who don't have the offensive coaches. I get that. But I feel like if you're going to bring in and develop a young quarterback, I want the highest ranking guy in the meetings, the head coach, to be able to sniff out the mistakes. When the offensive coordinator says, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want the head coach to be able to look at that and go, you know what? We tried that when I was at this place, and here's why it didn't work. Like, I want that extra expert voice in the room, right? Because I'm tired of ruining young quarterbacks. And whether ruining or just not developing or not failing to identify, failing to develop, every single conceivable way you can fail a quarterback, this team has done it. And I think that by bringing in an offensive head coach, you're bringing in another expert. Because I don't want 50 guys. I don't want too many cooks in the kitchen. Hire an offensive coordinator you believe in. Let him run a system. But I want an offensive mind to be the guy who's watching the game plan and saying, here's why this will work. Here's why that won't work. Whatever. And again, I'm not dead because, look, I think Aaron Glenn would be a really good hire. The more time goes on, the more I think about it, I'm more open now to the idea of Brian Flores than I was originally. Because what we need to know, Dylan, and you mentioned it, we need to know who the coordinator is. Mm-hmm. Who are you bringing with you? Now, the problem is, I believe, when you bring in a rookie head coach, he's going to have a hard time attracting veteran, proven offensive minds. At least that's my theory. Listen, again, I haven't researched it. I don't have a stack of data to say here's the numbers on how often a rookie head coach gets an established, and there won't be a lot of established. I mean, we don't know how many established guys will be out there. But anyway, we won't beat this topic to death. This is more of a GM show, but I just wanted to throw that topic out there from the forums at JetNation by Pep. I thought it was a really good one. Jimmy says Woody has to open the checkbook and suddenly it becomes a much nicer job. Or, excuse me, Woody opens the checkbook and it becomes a much nicer job. That's what I've been saying all along, is Woody is going to have to accept the fact that he's not going to get a desirable candidate, or he's going to have to overpay, which I'm glad that came up because I want to clarify something. When I say Woody has to overpay, this has happened a few times. I think there are people who interpret that as me saying I don't want him to overpay. I don't give a damn if he overpays.
Yeah, no.
My thing is, will he be willing to? That's why it's a talking point.
Well, some might say that he probably overpaid for Douglas at the time. What was it, 6 years, $20 million?
Like, yeah, but I don't think he did because Douglas was a highly sought-after candidate. And
right.
And who basically
some might have just said it at the time. Hey, maybe this is an overpay, or hey, you have to go pay top dollar to get that top dollar.
And that's kind of my example. Joe Douglas probably said, look, you're a garbage franchise. You never win anything. Your roster is a little league roster. I'm going to need 3-4 years to rebuild that thing. So I'm going to need a 6-year deal if you want me to come. And Woody did it, which is fine. So when I say he has to overpay, I'm not saying, oh no, he's going to have to. I don't care. I'm just saying we better hope he's willing to do it because that's what it's going to take. So we'll see what happens there. Wild Wave makes the point: if you're a good head coach, you're a good head coach. And I don't disagree with that, Wild Wave. I've said that in years past. I've said we're getting too hung up on offense, defense. But I've sat there too many times now and watched young quarterbacks develop under offensive head coaches. And I'm like, we got to do that.
Yeah.
But of course, the one time they do it, they bring in Adam Gase, who shows up at the presser like he's on God knows what. And I
think to Wild Wave's point, I mean, Vrabel had 2 offensive coordinators that got poached to be head coaches. So, I mean, if we got that version of any defensive-minded head coach, we're going to sign up for that immediately, or at least put him up in the top of our rankings. But that's not that needs to be proven yet. We thought we had that in Saleh and LaFleur, and the minute LaFleur got hired, everybody was crying that, in 2 years he's going to be gone. And it's like, in 2 years he was gone, all right.
Yeah, but not for the reasons everyone predicted.
But how did he go? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. So, all right, let's move on to the GM hunt, the GM names that are out there, and I'm going to start with a caveat to that, Dylan.
Sure.
It's fine to talk about. There are names out there. We're going to want to discuss them. But my biggest thing with GM candidates, no matter where a guy comes from, no matter what success that team has had, we have no idea what their position was on any of the moves that were made. You could say, look at this team, pick a random team. The Cowboys. I read an article a couple years ago says Jerry Jones, for like that 5-year stretch, had the best draft record in the NFL in terms of like number of games played by draft picks and whatever metric they used. Jerry Jones was the best. The article is a couple years old, whatever. So let's say hypothetically we look at right now today. We pull up who's the most successful team drafting starters, all pros, whatever metric you want to use. Who's the most successful team? And let's say it's the Chiefs. I don't know if it is. I'm just using them as an example. Okay, great. That tells us nothing about what the candidate was saying at the time. That candidate may have been against every good pick they made. That dude could have been banging the table for every first-round bust in the draft, and we're just going, that dude came from the Chiefs, and look how good they are. Look at their draft record. Well, Andy Reid knows a thing or two, and I shouldn't even get that far into it because then we are making it Chiefs specific. My whole point is that we'll talk about these people having not one iota, not one clue as to what they have advocated for in the past, despite the success of the teams around them.
Yeah, we'll use an example who's not on the list, but Glenn Cook, the executive from the Browns. I used him in an example a couple weeks ago if like Vrabel was to be our head coach. We don't know what his influence was in wanting Deshaun Watson. So like we can say in a positive way, yes, the Browns are a good front office to a degree, blah, blah, blah. They have hireable candidates. But then at the same time, it's like, who the hell is responsible for Deshaun Watson's contract and what everything that's happened over there?
I would need to know. I think I said at the time, I would need to know
exactly.
That,
and it goes
he's off my list if he
Yeah, you can do that with every single candidate. And that's why I think GM candidates are so much harder to talk about, analyze, break down, rank, do all these things other than just talk about openly than like a head coach, because their play on the field kind of defines it. If you have a good linebackers coach, okay, yeah, he's good with linebackers, maybe he's a good DC. That's the kind of progression. With a front office guy, we have no idea who's pulling strings. The analytics guy could be feeding this guy, and we don't know anything. So it's very hard to figure out who's who. So it's just a lot of names at this point, but a lot of names are retreads from the 33rd, or not, Rick Spielman, because he wasn't part of the 33rd team when he did the Commanders. And I think that's the important part. It was Rick Spielman as a separate entity with the Commanders, not the 33rd team and Tannenbaum and all the other guys attached to the 33rd team. So, yeah, with that, I think it's kind of appropriate that we talked about Aaron Glenn at the top, because the first name on the list from Zach Rosenblatt was Ray Agnew, the Lions assistant GM. And to me, this is probably my 1A or 1B candidate. And again, it's hard to rank all these guys, but just a little blurb from the Lions team website about what he did in Los Angeles. He was there for 18 years in the scouting department, by the way. In Los Angeles, Agnew was tasked with evaluating all 32 NFL rosters in preparation for free agency and writing advanced scouting reports for upcoming opponents. For the draft, he evaluated all players on the Rams draft board and prepared grades alongside team need analysis for the draft process. Throughout the year, Agnew was also responsible for the preparation of potential trade scenarios. Sounds like everything our team never did in the last 3 years. Advanced scouting reports on the opponents. We don't even know who's reffing these games anymore. Like, teams have pictures of the refs and like their wife and kids' names on their play sheets, but the Jets don't even talk about it in the meetings. So, and then the free agency preparation. What have we lacked in the last 5 years? Free agency picks, probably 10 years, really. Free agency picks, and that's not a Joe Douglas exclusive thing.
No, that's in everything, and it's been bad.
So, like, those things that he did in Los Angeles obviously carried over to Detroit, and they've had success still. So, to me, he's probably my number one candidate. And his son works for our team already as a pro scout. So
say that again. I don't know if that came across. But I was about to mention that
Ray Agnew's son, Ray Agnew, I guess the second, is a pro scout for the Jets. So he is already in house, and that's one of the departments I wouldn't break down if I was the Jets. Is most of the scouting department. I think they do a good job.
Yeah, I think Agnew, with that level of responsibility, with that many years of experience, look, that's what you want. Listen, I've heard other pods, other shows talk about some of these candidates, and when I hear some of the, some of their background, and some of the people are on this list, and there are certain buzzwords that make me cringe when I hear them, when they say, the Jets should bring in this person. Here's their background, and actually I'll jump to that because it's the next name on the list that the Athletic did. Dawn Aponte. Former Jets employee. She worked under Mike Tannenbaum. When the lead bullet in their experience tells me they work the salary cap, I don't.
You're out on that?
John Idzik was a salary cap guy. Mike Tannenbaum was a salary cap guy. I don't want someone who started scouting when they were 37 years old. I just don't. I don't.
You wouldn't classify
I was
a little young for this, but you wouldn't classify the Tannenbaum era as good then?
Well, I think the
partly
best,
good or partly. I was like 12 when he was.
No, that's fine. I think the best of the Tannenbaum era came when Mangini was the coach, and I think Tannenbaum has kind of acknowledged that. And if he hasn't, it's known. Like, Mangini made those picks. Like, he just deferred to Mangini on the draft. And then Tannenbaum was the guy who traded up to draft Mark Sanchez before Mangini got there, who, Sanchez was atrocious. So, no, I didn't think Tannenbaum was very good. The thing Tannenbaum did that I liked, and because I've always been a big believer, as much as I love the draft, and we love talking about it, and the draft is phenomenal. Really, as a Jets fan, it's the best event of the year. It's better than anything on the field. But I think teams grossly overvalue their draft picks. Mm-hmm. And I feel like if you can get a proven, established veteran player for a mid-round pick, you do it. And we saw Tannenbaum do that a few times, which I like in big spots where they needed a guy. So I did like that about Tannenbaum.
Mhm.
But as far as the drafts, his best picks were Mangini and Bradway, and his worst picks were him because again, I'm sure he let Rex have a lot of influence, but I don't think Rex. Or there's no reason to believe Rex had the clout that Mangini had when it came to draft day. So no, Tannenbaum wasn't terrible. Don't get me wrong. There's been
Yeah,
worse. Idzik was the worst. And I don't want somebody with a salary cap. I want somebody with a scouting background.
sure.
So when the
That's fair.
first thing you tell me is that this person worked for Mike Tannenbaum and worked the salary cap, I don't know.
Would you take
Not
somebody
interested.
from the pro personnel side of it, not the scouting, but pro personnel, like maybe meet in the middle of draft and salary cap, I guess, because
I
that's
mean, I
one
could
of the
live with the
third
pro
avenues, I
personnel side
guess.
because it's still player evaluation.
Right,
It's
right. That's what. Yeah,
different level. It's you're looking at scheme fit and you're looking at things like that, but
right,
and you're watching them compete against a higher level, so it is a little bit different. But
right.
I think
Because
it's
technically,
still
that's
player
Agnew's
evaluation.
position title right now is director of pro personnel. But like I said, he spent 18 years in the Rams scouting department, so like scouting background turned pro personnel. I think when you see the transition like that, it helps obviously because now you have a background in college and pro scouting and talent evaluation.
Right, right. So the next one up. Sorry. Did you have any thoughts on Aponte, Dylan?
Basically similar to yours. I'm not a huge salary cap person. There's a lot of names on my list. Like I have like 40 something names just curated from all the websites I've seen of candidates, and anybody that does have that salary cap, attached to them, it's kind of like, I'll lean somewhere else. I think like her resume speaks as if she should be deserved of a GM candidacy. So like if we interviewed her, she interviewed for the Chargers last year, and they obviously hired Tom Telesco, if I'm not mistaken. So she's going to get an interview, maybe not for the Jets, but right now we're the only GM spot open. So maybe 2 or 3 more open up and she probably gets a couple interviews. I wouldn't be mad at it, but like at the same time, I don't think the Jets would do that.
No, no. Real quick, correct the historical record here. Micro Fox says Pryor was a Rex pick. That's actually not correct. That was Pryor was a player who John Idzik went out and scouted personally and called Rex and was like, "I found our guy. I got us a
Calvin Pryor?
sledgehammer." What's that?
Calvin Pryor? Yeah, the
Yeah,
safety.
yeah. So it was John Idzik who went out and scouted Calvin Pryor and came back just downright giddy over finding the next great Jets defensive back. So that was 100% John Idzik pick who busted. I mean,
Oh
all of
boy.
Idzik's picks busted. There were no good ones. Even the ones that were good for like a year or two, and then they
When you have to say
no.
Quincy Anun was the best of the Idzik 12,
Yeah,
and he was like
easily,
the second to
and he
last
couldn't stay on the
pick.
field.
Yeah, and
He was
a
one of the
great
first
Jet.
players
Like,
I interviewed when I started with JetNation, and
that's
I
great.
used to reach out to players, and even just in a few years, it became more and more difficult to get players to respond
Mhm.
because all of us, we went from like there were like 5 or 6 podcasts to 10,000, and I think teams and agents probably told a lot of guys, there's nothing to be gained. Don't reply to these guys.
Yeah.
They don't.
You say one thing wrong
You
and it
can
goes
only go on and
viral.
say something stupid that'll get you in trouble.
Yep.
It's not worth the risk. So really, players just stopped doing them, largely, not completely. And we found that when we had players on, it didn't affect the views or listens a great deal. So it was like it's not giving us a bump, But I think the thing is, everyone is so available on social media. Like 20, 30 years ago, when you'd never hear from a player, it would have been a big deal to get someone to come on and interview them because, oh, wow, someone's. But now it's like, oh, I follow that guy on Twitter. Like, if he has anything important to say, he
You can
tweets it
see
out.
his
I don't have to
takes
listen to a
here. Yeah.
podcast to hear what he
Right.
thinks. So it kind of, we stopped pursuing it after that. But anyway, yeah, Quincy, total class guy, one of the first guys I interviewed for the site, and the best pick of that, of the Idzik 12. I loved him in college. He was a guy who, the way I used to say it, and it ended up ending his career. I was like, this guy's a wide receiver who hits like a linebacker, and he was.
Mhm.
And there were a few plays that he had that year in Nebraska where they turned the ball over, and he laid like the guy, like whoever got the interception, like Quincy laid them out like a linebacker. But anyway, getting back
All right, next name
to
on the list. Yeah, Mike Borgonzi, assistant GM of the Chiefs. It's funny because you talked about the Chiefs earlier as your example, and I think he's the only person on this list. Technically, a couple came from the Chiefs originally, but he's another one of those guys that's like, I don't know exactly what he did in the Chiefs organization, but the things about him kind of do speak nicely about what he did there. 7 different roles since 2009. Starting in 2009, administrator of college scouting, manager of football ops, pro scout, assistant director of pro scouting, director of player personnel, director of football ops, and then now assistant GM for the last 4 seasons. So he's come up from the bottom essentially of the Chiefs organization. It's not like somebody who's only been there since, Patrick Mahomes has been there, and, it's kind of easy to coattail his success into your success in the front office, but he's only had 1 interview, and it was last year with the Commanders. I don't know if that was a Rick Spielman influenced pick. I believe it was. So if that's the case, he's going to get a chance with the Jets. And I put those guys in bold because it's important to know who Spielman interviewed last year, because he's probably going to bring those same names, which we'll get to on the list as well. But those same names are going to come back for the Jets.
Yeah. It's it's one thing where we talk about not knowing what a guy was, where he stood on the moves that were made. But when you get a team like the Chiefs, when you have a head coach with a resume like Andy Reid obviously is going to have more sway than an inexperienced rookie young coach on draft day.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like this guy is really third in the pecking order, or fourth. Like, what did you say? Is he assistant GM? Is that what you said?
Assistant GM, but I believe they have another guy who's either of the same title or like VP of personnel. So it's like, 1A, 2B.
That's what I mean. You could be getting to like the guy who's fourth or fifth in the pecking order on a team that's carried by Patrick Mahomes. I mean, do we need to look any further than the New England Patriots? And I know it's more on field, but how many people got jobs because of Tom Brady's success and they sucked?
Yeah,
everywhere they went, they lost. All of his assistants lost. When they had Bill, and really when they had Tom carrying them, they were geniuses. And then when they went elsewhere, listen, and maybe he's learned his lesson. I don't know. But what's his name? The guy who bailed on the Colts, McDaniel. That dude drafted Tim Tebow in the first round to be a quarterback. And I'm supposed to believe he's an offensive genius? I mean, come on. But because Tom Brady carried that guy, he got him a job. Now, listen, he's had other jobs since then. Maybe he's grew up. Maybe he might not be a bad hire for somebody right now. He might be that guy who needed a couple of stops and a couple of failures before he got whatever it may be. But when you see the number of people fail who came from the Patriots, despite all that success, it makes me wonder, like, you're fifth in command on a team with Andy Reid. Like, Andy Reid, I know he never won before Patrick Mahomes, but, like, never won a Super Bowl, but he was fantastic in Philly. Like, Donovan McNabb was not that great. And they were in the NFC Championship, like, every year and might have won the Super Bowl if not for the T.O. thing and McNabb being out of shape. But, so, really, I don't know. That one worries me. Yeah. And, again, if you're just tuning in, I said at the top, we don't know these people inside and out. We're guessing. 100% guessing. So if you're giving me the criteria, you're giving me making a case for this guy, and the case is he's fourth or fifth in command at a team with a Hall of Fame quarterback, I'm like, all right, maybe he'll be great. I don't know, but maybe he's just another guy getting carried by the guys ahead of him.
Yeah, I think the only person I can remember from the Chiefs organization getting moved into a better position with another team was Ryan Poles, who's the GM of the Bears right now, and he's on the hot seat. Obviously, they fired Eberflus a couple weeks ago. I think they said Poles was safe for now, but obviously if your season, keeps getting derailed further and you lose out the last 4 games or whatever, or Caleb doesn't look great or whatever the situation is, there's obviously a chance he's fired. So it doesn't even seem like their executives so far. History shows, I mean, it's just one sample, but not so great so far.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's it's all such a crapshoot. But that was Borgonzi. Brandon Brown. I mean, we're talking now Giants assistant GM. Are we really
hard pass?
And the second in command for one of the only teams that are worse than the Jets right now?
No, because all I think about is Joe Shane laughing at John Mara, and I know it's not Brandon Brown at all, but just Shane laughing at John Mara about Saquon going to Philadelphia, not being able to sleep on Hard Knocks. Like, Who let these decisions come to where Saquon stays and Daniel Jones gets $40 million? I don't want any part of that.
Yep, absolutely.
While we've
That's
asked, hold on, if Ryan Poles gets fired, I don't know. I don't know what the Bears' record is right now, but the way that they've looked the past couple weeks, I mean, unless they turn things around from an on-field standpoint, I don't think anybody's safe. Kind of like the Jets. I don't think the Bears owner flies off the handle like Woody does necessarily, but they fired Eberflus like an hour and a half after he talked to the media on like a Tuesday after or a Friday after the loss on Thanksgiving. So it's like the time. I don't know. Everything is weird right now in the
that
NFL,
might
and
be
like
because Eberflus came out and he was like, "I'm happy with the way that went."
yeah, but I've
Like we
heard this
can't defend
argument
this.
for
That sorry, go ahead.
no. I've heard this argument for coaches like about Shanahan. Like if Shanahan got fired, oh shit! Now I lost my point. Fuck, I lost my point. I lost my point. I lost where I
That's
was
what
going.
I was going to say about Eberflus. I don't know if you heard this. That's the first time in their franchise in over 100 years they've never fired a coach in season. Eberflus is the
Yeah,
first.
and the Jets. Oh, so that yes, thank you. That was my point. So Shanahan, if you heard Shanahan was available, and you're a team who doesn't necessarily know the stability of your head coach, would you consider firing your head coach to go after Kyle Shanahan? Probably, right? So if a GM candidate that you really loved could be available, and you want to be like, screw Ryan Poles, we don't really care because we want to go after this guy. Yeah, any franchise is willing to do that. So that's where I was getting at with my Shanahan and to the GM point. Like if there's a guy out there that the Bears love, maybe they say, see you later, Ryan Poles. We're going to go after this guy, or a woman like we talked about, Donna Ponte. Maybe she's the woman that takes over the job. So yeah, it all depends. But maybe I would say right now, no, he doesn't get fired.
Yeah. Question here from Dano. Good question, Dano. Basically saying, are we picking what we want the Jets to do or predicting what they'll do? I think neither at this point. We're just kind of looking at the candidates.
Just looking.
It's so early in the process.
Yeah. Maybe we'll say if we like them or not as like a candidate for like how we see the Jets fit, but like I don't know, it depends on how you want the team to be built. Like if you want them to be centric around the draft, like Glenn said, maybe you want a scouting background who's going to accumulate more draft picks, or maybe somebody who's more money ball. Like I know that's been the hot thing in sports, but like I don't know. Like it depends on how you see the team being built.
Yeah, and I guess having said that this isn't one or the other, but there are some names on here that I'll probably say like, yeah, I'd like that guy.
Or Brandon Brown, we just said no, thanks. In like 30 seconds, it was an easy pass.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. That brings up Ian Cunningham, Chicago Bears GM, came up with Joe Douglas in the Ravens and Eagles front office, viewed as a rising star in league circles. He's been with the Bears since 2002, finalist for the Commanders and Cardinals jobs in recent years, expected to get another shot. Expected to at least interview with the Jets, though he could have better options. What better options than the Jets? No way.
There's no better GM option today than the Jets available.
What's that? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you name me one team right now. All right. That might change in a few weeks, but yeah, today the Jets have the best GM job opening in the NFL.
This is the best you're going to get. No,
yep.
I think
Ian Cunningham positive on his resume. He's worked both college scouting and personnel departments in the NFL. So he's worked college and pro, which is nice. You like to hear that.
Yeah. I put him in the same bucket as the Giants GM that we just talked, or assistant GM we just talked about. Anybody coming from like a perennially bad organization, I don't see being the team to pluck from. I'd rather, go big with Mike Borgonzi from the Chiefs and say, hey, we rested on the fact that they're a good organization and we wanted to replicate that. If you take this guy from the Bears, like, that's like, oh, we think he's the guy for the job because we think he's the guy for the job. That's the kind of answer I feel like you're getting in the press conference with an Ian Cunningham.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like you said, his resume does sound good, but the Bears just stink, man. Like we suck, but like the Bears stink too.
They do. Thomas Dimitroff, former Falcons GM from 2008 to 2020. Falcons made the playoffs 6 times. Playoffs, what are those? In his 13 years, so the Jets have 0 in 14 years. This guy made the playoffs 6 times in 13, including a Super Bowl run in 20. Listen, when you draft a franchise quarterback, and he did that when he took Matt Ryan, and didn't hurt his cause when he drafted Julio Jones a couple years later. He's been working for a football analytics company since the Falcons fired him, though it's believed he wants to get another job running a team. League sources think he'll be interested in the Jets job. So here's what I'll say about that. And really, any of these candidates. I like the idea, not a must, not has to. I would like a GM with experience who's had some success because this people are going to look, everyone's entitled to their opinion. My opinion is that the Jets have some good things in place. They don't need a completely rebuild, which, I mean, I guess if they need a complete rebuild, that would be an even stronger case for an experienced guy. So I'm kind of not really contradicting, but I guess I just want someone experienced at this point. But especially, again, a guy who has had success, who's proven he can do it. And if he's been working analytics the last couple of years, that's sort of, a more emergent field than when he started out. So that's him sharpening some skills and getting better than what he was before, ideally. So, no, not a perfect GM, but he's had enough success that I would have no problem if they consider somebody like that.
So when you say prior success, do you put a retread hire immediately higher up than like a first-time guy, or if a first-time candidate has like sustained success within that first organization, you would see them in like the same light as a retread? Because we have retreads on the list other than Dimitroff, and I like Dimitroff, so I just didn't know like what you meant exactly by that.
Yeah, I would. That's not a bad way of putting it. Again, just because I don't want the rookie mistakes. I want someone who has done it because I feel like this team. It's a weird thing. Like I have to be objective in my analysis. Even though I believe they'll screw it up and lose. So it's weird.
There's subjectivity in it, but
I'm convinced they'll always fail. But I have to look at it objectively and pretend they might not. Like I said to someone the other day, I was doing Scott's show. We was doing Play Like a Jet, and I said we've reached that point now where we have to pretend what the Jets do next will matter, even though I know it won't. And so that's what I feel like. This is a performance. Let's pretend it matters, because they will screw it up anyway. But no, if pretending it will matter, yes, I think there's a good O-line in place. We actually haven't even mentioned his name. We should have a brief conversation about Aaron Rodgers, kind of circling around what I touched on the other day on the solo show that I did, the quarterback situation. But that aside, the quarterback situation aside, bringing a GM who has built a winner. Granted, they didn't win a Super Bowl, but they got to a Super Bowl. They went to the playoffs a bunch of times. I would like that to be the move they make over a complete unknown who may or may not. You might, for all you know, and it's a little bit hyperbolic. Anything could happen. You might land the next Ozzie Newsome, but you also might land the next John Idzik, which, I've said before, which half tongue in cheek, right? Maybe you get, maybe the next guy is your next Mike McCagnon. It just feels like that's more likely in the Jets world than the next Ozzie Newsome, right? So who they get or who they'll get, we don't know, but I like the idea of a known guy who has had some success. And then even that will probably help with because I'm anticipating get ready for it, inexperienced rookie defensive head coach. If you can believe Woody Johnson would make such a hire, I like, for that reason, I don't want a rookie head coach and a rookie GM.
Yeah, and I think Dimitroff proved he could hire a good staff. I mean, at one point he had Kyle Shanahan and Dan Quinn, who are now really successful head coaches. So went to a Super Bowl, like you said, 6 playoff appearances in 13 years, and it's just upsetting because Woody's owned this team for 25 years and we haven't had the playoffs in 14 or 15 of them. But before that, we were in the playoffs like every other year. And that's kind of like Dimitroff. It was like not every other year necessarily, but that's what it is. 6 and 13, you have a 50% chance. It feels like with the Jets, it's like you enter the season with like a 15% chance to make the playoffs, just on basis alone. Obviously, this year expectations were different, but I can get on board with a retread hire. Before we get to the next name, who's actually, there's a couple retread hires coming up. Yeah. If I asked you right now, you had to make a home run hire at one of these 3 positions, which would it be? GM, head coach, or quarterback, and why?
You're saying
the other 2 you're getting league average. So if you hired a above average GM, you're getting a league average head coach and quarterback.
Quarterback.
You're taking the quarterback?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm taking the head coach.
Okay.
So I think only because we've seen, a middling quarterback like a Jared Goff have success with a really good coach. And I think Dan Campbell / Ben Johnson are good coaches. So I think you get the home run hire with the head coach. and I think the other pieces kind of fall into place. And maybe this is a hot take, but you didn't say GM, but I would definitely like GM is like immediately last on my list, which gives me hope that like even a first-time guy with no experience could still be successful if we had a good head coach and a halfway decent quarterback.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'll forever be impacted by Bill Belichick's career record before and after Brady, right? Like before Brady, he was a middling coach, barely hanging on to a job, and then Tom Brady got him into the Hall of Fame. So I just think, again, and I know what you mean, like if it's one of the other, if you're talking elite, healthy quarterback, like they can overcome so much.
Right.
They can make I mean, look, how many times have we seen guys that, and again, Brady's another great example of it. But quarterbacks, even the Chiefs, like the last few years, the Chiefs haven't had great wide receivers for Patrick Mahomes to work with. Granted, he's got Kelsey, but you look at all these other teams around the league that have way better receivers than the Chiefs do, and the Chiefs win the Super Bowl because they have a quarterback who give the Chiefs the Eagles wide receivers. Hell, give the Chiefs the Jets wide receivers.
I guess how you explained it, you've kind of like brought me to the Bengals. You have a really good quarterback. You have probably an average head coach, and then your front office is like mid-tier. So like that's not a bad, spot. I'm trying to think of a team, like I said, probably the Lions with a good head coach and a middle tier quarterback, but I also think they have a really good front office. So that's like 2 out of 3. It's hard to find an example for me off the top of my head, but I definitely think it's head coach or quarterback, however you think, and then probably GM third, which is kind of interesting.
And it really, listen, I mean, there's a million, like more than one way to skin a cat, right? Like if you could build a good enough roster, the example I always use is the team Jimmy Johnson built that Barry Switzer won with. Jimmy Johnson was essentially the GM, and he built that Cowboys team and won those rings, and then Jerry fired him because he wanted some credit. And then Barry Switzer, who was not a very good coach, came in and he won a Super Bowl too. Like the culture was there, the talent was there, and Switzer gets a ring out of it, but he was not very good. So I get what you're saying. And you can make cases for all of them. I just, 100%. If we're talking coach or GM, it's tough because, a coach could be like, you could have a great coach. Let's use Rex as the example, right? Because this is what I've said about Rex a few times recently since his name's come up. One thing, and this is just my opinion, others may disagree, that's fine. But I don't recall a season where a Rex Ryan team where you walked away and said, man, that team should have been so much better. They should have had X amount more wins. I will say, it was down to Sanchez, right? What was it, Sanchez's second or third year? I think it was his second year. They had 4 losses in games in which the defense gave up like 13 points or less.
That's ugly.
So they made the playoffs and they went to the AFC Championship game. Really they could have had a first round bye. But Sanchez was just so bad that they lost to Rodgers at home with was 9-0 or whatever, or 10-9 that game.
9-6.
They lost the opener to the Ravens. It was like 13-9 or whatever. They had 4 or 5 games. They gave up less than 14 points and lost. So, but even still, at the end of the year, Mark Sanchez was your quarterback, and you almost went to the Super Bowl. Like that's the best you can hope for. So Rex's teams, you always felt like, at least I always felt like, you got your money's worth. You were never like this year, where you're like, really, we have this guy, this guy, and we can't beat anybody.
If there was meat left on the bone of the season, there wasn't. That
exactly.
Yeah.
So again, you could say, well, Rex never won anything. Great, he didn't. And I've talked about it even recently. To me, that's the mark of a great coach. You can talk, oh, did you win a ring? Did you win a ring? What if his team sucked? What if, again, different sport, and people, I'm sorry, I know I've used it recently, but Felipe Alou with the Expos in the 80s and 90s, those teams sucked in terms of talent. They had nowhere near, now they had young talent that hadn't developed yet, but every single year, like they won way more than anyone would have predicted. And I was like, that guy will never win a World Series, but he will always, always, always get the most out of his team. That's what makes him great. So to me, if you get a coach who can get the most out of the talent, then yeah, give me that coach. But if the GM is that bad, it may not matter. So just find a few guys who can do a job well.
Right. Somebody that does their job efficiently for once. Micro Fox comes in with a question, and it leads us into what I think is the next candidate on the list, but who's the biggest of the retreads? I almost read that wrong. But who's the biggest of the retreads? John Dorsey, the next
Yeah.
name on the list.
Excuse
Got
me.
to be the biggest of the retreads. Just considering where he's been, former Chiefs GM, former Browns GM, worked in the Packers front office for a long time. Like, he's been around the game. If you haven't seen his sweater gum chewing personality on any of the NFL films by now, I'd be surprised. But he's definitely somebody who comes in with like that brash, mentality that like might, ruffle some feathers with Woody potentially. Like, that's like the Vrabel of the GM hires for me. But to me, that makes me think that he's the right guy for the job. Like, somebody's going to be like, you know what, Woody, sit down, let the football guys talk for a second. You just pay up when we ask you to, type thing. And obviously that's not realistic, but I think John Dorsey is probably the biggest of the retread names, and I would be completely on board with hiring him.
Yeah, he's another name on there that I would have no problem with. Again, having some experience, having some success. It's going to be interesting to see if because Woody has. Here's the thing, the thing with Woody, people always knock him for being cheap, which to me is always has been a complete myth. But one thing Woody does that doesn't help himself in that category is always hiring lesser known guys, first timers. Now look, he tried to hire Jim Harbaugh once and it blew up in his face. He did go out and get Saleh, who was, highly thought of. But the fact that it's always inexperienced young guys, it's almost like the Jets are a proving ground or like a place to, like the Jets are a stepping stone on your way to being good somewhere else or being bad somewhere else. But the Jets are like you're like a on the job training. I'm going to work for the Jets for a few years and then see if I can get a real job. And that's the way it feels sometimes. And always hiring these guys doesn't help. Wild Wave says he's cheap. He's not.
I don't think he's cheap
historically.
I just think it's like miscalculated
you look at how much the
money.
Jets spend. They there are some years they're not in the top 5 or 10, but they are consistently in the top 5, 10 in money spent over Woody's 22 years as the owner.
I just
had
think
years
it's
where he pulls out
miscalculated.
tons of cash.
Yeah, where they put the money doesn't always turn out into success. But I think for the most part, Woody has like shown that he'll pay to a degree. Like, he'll go pretty high for a guy. I mean, the Tremaine Johnson deal was like absurd.
Devontae and
even
Rodgers.
Even more recent.
He might be handing Aaron Rodgers a check for $63 million next year to not play.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like he was willing to take on the risk of the single biggest dead cap hit in NFL history. You don't do that if you're cheap.
No, Russell Wilson wasn't it?
No, but Rodgers would be. I'm saying he's taking on the risk.
It in one season, they would definitely.
If Rodgers walks away after next year, it's a $63 million dead cap.
Because the Steelers spread it out. That's what you're saying. They paid 40 something. Yeah.
Well, it was the Broncos, and the Broncos. I don't think they spread it out.
Yeah.
They still paid $53 million or $52 million.
52. Okay, I didn't know this.
50 something in one shot. I'm pretty sure that was the whole hit.
Yeah.
So we'll see. And again, if he leaves after this year, it's a 40. Well, it'll be they can split it 35-14. I think just take the whole damn hit this year and get it over with.
Yeah.
So
you don't want a $40 million hit in 2027 if you split that up. The 63, you don't want that.
No, not at all.
Next name on the list, another retread. The exact opposite feeling when I hear his name compared to John Dorsey, and that's Ray Farmer, another Browns GM. He was the Browns GM from 2014 to 15, and I don't have to tell you it didn't go well in those years in Cleveland. But I don't know. He's one of those weird ones to me because now he's with the Rams, and I don't know how to feel about his background versus what he does now to say anything definitively. So I would err on the side of caution and say no.
Yeah, not a ton of experience, not a ton of success. You gotta get somebody who's done something. Let's see what 2014, 2015 he went 10-22. I don't see the draw there. He's probably the Jets hire, but I don't see the draw there. Probably because he just
works for the Rams. That's probably the allure right now. But
yeah, that's fine. That's Mike Greenberg. Here's an interesting one. He's another guy. Let's see. Yeah, that's the bit I was looking for. Salary cap. Considered one of the rising GM candidates around the league. Served as Jets salary cap expert under Jason Licht in Tampa for the last few years. I'd expect the Jets to at least interview him. Interesting thing with him, don't want him because of the salary cap thing. But one thing I did hear, and I think it was from Spielman, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong about that. No, it wasn't Spielman. It was on Sweeney's podcast. They were talking about him, and he is apparently a lifelong Jets fan.
Yep, his whole
Family
family.
lives in Long Island, season ticket holders. Might have even been like NFL Network or something. I don't think it was whoever it was.
It was a mainstream media member.
Yeah, it was a mainstream outlet that basically said I think it was Schrager, might have been Schrager, who said that he's a lifelong Jets fan, family, season tickets, all that. That's all great. But that you don't hire a guy for that reason. And when I hear cut his teeth as a salary cap guy, again, to me, it's a big red flag. Don't love it.
His name is a red flag for me, just based on the ESPN analyst.
Jeez, oh my God!
I don't want to have that. Like,
if he's 1/1,000th the drama queen that Greeny is, that guy, I'm embarrassed that I used to like that guy. Like, I used to watch Mike, and I used to think it was so funny. I think Greenberg's shtick was funny for a couple years. Oh, look, he's the dorky little wimpy guy who doesn't lift weights, and they make fun of him being like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like the wimpy guy. You got the big tough guy who played in the NFL, and you got the little wimpy guy sitting next to him. They're both making fun of how he can't fight and he's not physical. That was all fine, but the whining out of him. I mean, dude, I was all out on that guy when he said he missed Adam Gase after like one game of Robert Saleh. Like, that was it. You're dead to me as a Jets fan. You're a moron.
Yep.
No. So
he gives me secondhand embarrassment as a Jets fan sometimes.
Yeah, that's hard to do.
Look, cringe with his just everything he says.
Give me Rich Eisen 1,000,000 times out of 1,000,000.
100%.
A normal human being who doesn't act like Greenberg does. But back to the GM aspect of it. Listen, the salary cap thing, like I said, is a red flag. But
there's another guy
he may also.
I like.
What's that?
There's another guy from Tampa that we're going to get to that I like a lot better.
Okay, let's move on to the next one.
Yep.
Mike Martin, Lions Director of Scouting Advancement, paid his dues, worked his way up at the Lions front office for a key role with one of the best organizations in the NFL. He was one of Holmes' first front office hires, oversees strategy processes and data analytics, and he works with the college and pro personnel staff to enhance the scouting and roster building process, according to the Lions website. Started his career as talent eval for the Texans. Again, look, experience, pro side, college side, talent evaluation, successful team. Okay, bring him in. Like, worth considering.
It sounds like a lesser version of Ray Agnew, just because I don't know as much about him. But yeah, everything I've heard, it's like, yeah, give me Agnew or him from the Lions front office. And just the name, Director of Scouting Advancement, like, that's so out of the thinking of the Jets organization, right? They don't even think about scouting advancement. No, they couldn't even be bothered with that. So yeah, give me a guy who has that type of background for sure.
Yep. That was Mike Martin. After that, you've got Lance Newmark, assistant GM with the Commanders, spent years in the Lions organization, part of their rebuild, hired away by Washington when the new ownership group. Spielman, who will be assisting the Jets search, helped the Commanders, which landed them Peters. And let me see real quick. Did it say? Okay, and so Newmark, if he spent years in the Lions organization, that means he's worked with Chris Spielman, who is Rick Spielman's brother, Lions executive, former Lions linebacker. So there will be a tie in there. For that reason, I would expect him to get an interview as well.
Yeah, I have no notes on him, but yeah, anybody from the Commanders, I would assume, has ties to Adam Peters, who got hired by Spielman last year, would get at least a look from the Jets.
Next up, current Jets interim GM Phil Savage, 24-40 for the Browns from 2005 to 2008. Since then, he spent time with the Eagles, and he was the GM of the Arizona Hotshots. Who can forget that? He's been with the Jets since 2019 as a senior personnel advisor. If they're looking for experience, he has it. And he has worked for Woody Johnson. And he predates Jim Nagy at the Senior Bowl, where Phil Savage ran the show down there for a few years. So someone you ran into in Mobile last year, right, Dylan?
The first person I ran into in Mobile getting off my flight in Pensacola was Phil Savage. I almost ran into the back of him. And yeah, we had a little bit of a conversation, and that was the day before the Rex Hogan story came out. That's my dog here. Hold on. Yeah,
You had
I
me mute
talked.
my microphone. I thought it was my dog.
I know every time we don't know whose it is, but yeah, he was such a great guy. I mean, I even said I was like, oh yeah, I met Mr. Hogan the year prior when you guys were down here. I think it was two years ago from when I met him. So it's just such a cool experience. That's why I advocate so hard for people to go to the Senior Bowl. Like if you're in the area and you're part of the media in any way, shape, or form, just apply for credentials. The worst thing they'll tell you is no, but like go there. Like you will see so many people. You'll run into so many different personnel members just out on the streets of Mobile. Like we sat next to 3 scouts from the Jets at dinner, like it's just things like that. So yeah, Phil was a cool guy to talk to. All that being said, think he's been okay with his time at the Jets. I give him an interview and see what he has to say about the team, because he knows more about the team than anybody else currently does, obviously. But I don't think he has the strongest odds to get this job.
Well, it's interesting. I wonder if his being familiar with the team is good or bad at this point.
Yeah,
Like, does
it could
Woody
be
want a big
bad.
enough reset that he's like, I'm not keeping a guy who was a part of what we just built? It'll be interesting to see. Seems like a good enough guy. And again, talking about guys who develop and learn, did that time in Mobile help him working with every team in the NFL and watching prospects, all day, every day for a couple of weeks, every year for several years. That that could have had an impact on his development
He
as a
elevated
talent
Kune
evaluator.
Nwangu, so he has an eye for Nwangu apparently, because he got up on the game day roster under Savage. So
Well,
uh,
that was I can't remember if we talked about this when Savage was named the interim. I kind of thought to myself, are they now going to grab some guys that he liked that they didn't grab? And then they
potentially,
poached Jalen Simpson the other day,
yes, I saw
um,
that.
who was an Auburn DB who was at the Senior Bowl, who I liked. Um, Honestly, didn't realize I liked him a lot at Auburn. Played corner. I knew he played safety last year. I didn't realize he played almost no corner until I looked at
Mm.
his snaps the other day.
Oh, he's a
He
complete
was
convert to safety.
last year exclusively slot and safety.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the previous years at Auburn, he was a boundary corner. So
Yeah.
he's a guy who gives you that versus. And that was one thing I noticed in Mobile. I don't know if you remember me saying it. Um, he was a lot more physical than I anticipated as a corner.
Mm-hmm.
Not again, I knew he played some safety last year. I didn't realize it was exclusively,
Yeah.
or almost exclusively. So he was a physical guy, and this we'll talk about that in a few minutes about this secondary being as banged up as it is.
Yeah.
John Spytek sounds like he runs a company for the government, but he is apparently a real person who works in football. Buccaneers assistant GM. So people are high on that Bucks front office. He should draw interest from the Jets. Worked for Licht, currently works closely with the Bucks GM when it comes to the draft, free agency, and other personnel decisions, as well as opening or overseeing the day-to-day operations for Tampa's college and pro scouting. I like, again, college and pro working both. You got to like that.
Yeah, no, 100%. I had it written down here. In his career, Spytek has worked with a number of high-level executives and coaches, including, which I think the list is silly for putting John Elway first, but John Elway, Andy Reid, Mike Holmgren, I don't recognize this name, Tom Heckert, John Harbaugh, and Gary Kubiak. So like a pretty good list of names that he's worked with. So he has, sorry. He has a list of good names in his background, plus everything that you listed before, all the scouting personnel, the pro personnel, the day-to-day operations, everything but the salary cap pretty much is what we got out of Spytek. So I want all the things Spytek brings versus like we talked about with Mike Greenberg before. I like Spytek's background a lot more.
All right, 2 more to go. Nolan Teasley, Seahawks assistant GM, who's in his 12th year with the organization, working under John Schneider. He's there in his 2nd year as the assistant GM after spending most of his time in pro personnel. Teasley due for some interviews, they believe.
I don't really have an opinion. I know Connor Hughes has put his name out there twice, which makes me nervous because Connor's inside the building, so he might have, tips on names that might actually be serious candidates, and he said his name twice, so it's somebody to keep an eye on for sure.
And last but not least, Josh Williams, 49ers Director of Scouting and Football Ops. Many in league circles believe the 37-year-old is an under the radar rising star. Paid his dues for 14 years in San Fran, working under John Lynch and Parag Marath. Williams is lauded for his intelligence and worked his way up from the lowest levels of the organization to where he is now running point on game strategy. He came up a college scout. I mean, that's all.
Yeah.
Did he say to trade all those picks for Trey Lance? I'm gonna need to know that. I need to know if he's the guy.
Do you think any 49ers guy is coming here after Saleh? And I know that's like the part of the take that I hate the most is like, oh, they're not going to want to come here. Or the Jets are never going to get this type of guy. But I even think about it like with a Shanahan level. Like, even if the Jets were willing to trade for Shanahan, like, does Shanahan want to come here after what they just did to his best friend Rob Saleh or his good friend Rob Saleh? I don't know if the 49ers is the tree to pluck from, but I mean, 37 years old, his credentials are ridiculous, and I would love to have it. It's kind of funny.
Yep.
Imagine if you bring this guy in and you keep Aaron Rodgers, and your quarterback at the end of the season is 4.5 years older than your GM. I think that's just hilarious. So, I wouldn't be mad at the pick or the hiring, but I think it's a weird tree to watch from with the 49ers.
Yeah, I think, and that's a point someone made earlier when we were talking about the candidate who came up with Douglas in Philly and Baltimore. What are the odds that one of those guys is going to want to come work for Woody if they have other options? Listen, if you have no other options, you're probably going to interview. When guys turn down interviews, usually that's like the top prospects, and normally it's like coaching jobs. But it does happen with GMs. We saw George Patton do it in Denver. We saw Eric DeCosta do it in Baltimore. If people know they're being groomed to be the next guy and they're not in any rush, they sometimes won't interview. But look, if they're going to have several offers and they've got their good friend Joe on the phone saying, dude, you're going to get overruled on picks. FYI, don't trade for a future Hall of Fame quarterback because then you lose control of the roster. So I don't know. I don't know if that's where I'd be looking.
Yeah. You said Eagles and Ravens specifically, and there's another name that Hughes brought up, and he wasn't on the list, but Alec Hallaby, the assistant GM from the Eagles, Hughes has brought his name up with Teasley twice. I just want to share my screen real quick and give everybody a look at what he looks like. And don't judge a book by its cover, but tell me this guy's supposed to turn this franchise around.
No, you know what it is? It's not he looks like a college guy who stayed out all night, had a couple drinks.
He looks like
showed up for
the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man. That's what he looks like to me.
He looks like, and I'm not saying this because it's Philly, but he looks that's what I should have. He looks like a cast member from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
That's true too.
Yeah, that's what he looks like.
Not to hate on the guy. He's probably a very smart guy, but I don't like. I had that feeling with Zach too. You just look at the kid and you're just like, he's supposed to save the Jets.
I'm the last one to make fun of what anybody looks like. I own a mirror.
100%.
I'm fully aware of the situation. Don't anyone dare. What do you look like? Believe me, I know. I no one feels more sympathy for my wife than I do. But that guy looks like a Always Sunny in Philadelphia cast member for sure.
100%. All right, so that was the list. Good names. Obviously, I think one of these 15 names is probably the higher, but knowing that, the Jets will probably come off out of left field with some name that we've never heard of.
Do we need to talk about Brick Johnson?
No, because he's going to be CEO in a couple years, so it's like he could just bypass all
But you let him be the GM to kind of learn the ropes a little bit. Impress his friends.
I did learn Jeff Lurie does the exact same thing with his son. If anybody wants any copium with the Woody Brick stuff going on, Jeff Lurie does the same thing in Philly with his kid. But that doesn't mean it's going to work the same.
If you win, you can do whatever you want. Woody could let his dog run the team if they win. Nobody would care. Everybody would laugh.
If you're 11-2, you've won 9 straight, 11 plus wins in the last 3 seasons. Nobody gives a damn who is calling the shots.
Yeah, and listen, we're not gonna take a half an hour to talk about the Woody thing with his kid, but 2 things about that because it was a topic on JetNation on the forums. Some people were unhappy with the idea of like, he's a child, don't make fun blah, blah, blah. Don't attack somebody's kids. I get that, but also don't put your kids out in public as like, don't have them on camera on the website. And you know, and some people I've so and Dom C didn't like it, and several people on the JetNation forums. This is being cooked up by Samini. It's nothing there, nothing to see. Listen,
like downplaying the Brick involvement.
The Jets revoked a writer's credentials because he texted Joe Douglas when he saw his son at a baseball game. Right? Like, hey, I'm at a game and I just saw your son. Oh, really? Well, your credentials are gone now. So I don't think there is any world in which Rich Cimini is going to make up a story and tell Jets fans that the owner's son is involved in the day-to-day operations of the team and keep his credentials. And rightfully so. If that was a lie, the Jets should 100% pull his credentials.
Sure.
But they didn't. And there's no reason to. It's like when someone says, like when famous people say, like, oh, that guy wrote a book and said something about that guy and it's a lie. Well, like 3 million people bought that book. Why isn't that guy suing him?
Right.
Because that's slander. That's defamation. Like that, you defend your name in public if someone puts it out there that you've done something wrong. So yeah, I think if what Samini, I don't believe Samini would tell a lie that big. That would be insane. Mm-hmm. If he did, the team would pull his credentials. So the fact the team has not even said anything about it is like, that's all I need to know. Like,
and then we saw Otis Livingston, the CBS guy, on his Twitter account, which he then deleted a video of before all the players even got into the locker room. You see Woody after the game against Miami, and he's like, hey, Brick, come here, follow me. And Brick and like 3, 4, 5 of his friends follow Woody into the locker room. And like, then you see a couple assistant coaches, you see Morstead go in there. So like, what are they doing other than like watching how Woody acts? And like, that's what Brick is learning how to do is act like his father around the team and see the day-to-day operations. Me, truthfully, yes, Woody obviously has a right to be in the locker room with the guys, but like, what is your purpose at that point? Other than like, it's almost like rubbing salt in the wound at that point when the owner gets down there. And I know the owners come down from the box with the last 2 minutes left in almost every game. You see, executives on the sidelines in big moments of games down the stretch. They just come down from their box. But I just don't know if he needs to be in the locker room. Like, is he saying something? Like, is he going to get that last word in real quick? And I don't know. It's a weird look. But
and that's it. Look, they could be coming down to shake hands and say, nice job, good effort. No idea what they're doing.
Right, but he's watching his dad work and learning how to do it. So anybody that says sell the team, like if you're actually being serious at this point, please, it's not happening. It's just not happening.
I've been saying it for years, man. No, if anyone who says sell the team, ask them if they would sell if they owned it. They'd be like, no way, man, no way. But that's what Woody thinks.
Why would you? It's a multi-million-dollar side hustle, essentially, to most of these guys.
Better toy. Name a better toy that you could buy if you had all the money in the world. There isn't one. So, yeah. All right, so real quick, let's talk about the rookie running backs this week. Last week, Isaiah Davis, Braleon Allen. Thought they looked really good. Thought the O-line looked good again. The backs consistently 4 to 5 yards per carry on a weekly basis now for going on 7-8 weeks. Whether it's Brees now, I think Braleon may have been 3.9, whatever, but it's 4. Let's call it 4. Yeah. So they're 4 and up every week. Rodgers' protection has been good every week. Doesn't mean I hate when people like you say, oh, the O-line's good, and someone will point out like a sack. What about the sack that guy gave up? Jesus, like is that the standard now?
Yeah,
like you gave up 2 sacks today, so you suck. It's the NFL. Guys are going to get sacked. Aaron Rodgers, we've seen him do it a million times this year. He's holding on to the ball too long. The broadcast is pointing it out. You can see it on the All-22. I'm not saying constantly, but there are several sacks that were on him this year.
Yeah, he got sacked 3 times this past game, and the one was the late game scenario where it was take a sack and keep the clock running or throw an incomplete pass on 2nd and 15.
Right.
I truthfully agree with taking the sack. Yes, he missed Garrett Wilson clear as day. And if he was able to get back in his progression to Garrett Wilson, the whole trajectory of the game changes at that point. But in that moment, after you throw the toss for -5 yards and you have a running clock and you're trying to drain the clock, taking a sack for like minus whatever it was, 6 yards is better than an incomplete pass and stopping the clock, which they screwed up the time anyway. They managed to do like they do all the time. But
I was going to say, what do they not screw
the
up?
time management of this team is just abysmal. Like
Yeah.
that's a big thing with the next coach for me is like just know how football is played and like understand in certain situations what you have to do. We saw the Bills lose to the Rams because they ran a sneak with Josh Allen from the 2 or whatever it was, and they had a running clock and had to take a timeout. Just throw the ball at that point. Throw it 4 times and try to score, or I don't know. It's weird stuff like that I'd love to see our next coach actually execute.
Yeah, but the backs themselves, I
Yeah,
thought they
they
looked
look
good.
fantastic.
It's encouraging that they've looked good in pass pro. Not perfect, but good. There have been Isaiah Davis has had some not so great reps in pass pro, but he's getting there. He does it better than Izzy Abanikanda. That's why Izzy's not here anymore.
Yeah.
And I think they're both good players. I think I would like to see Malachi Corley get some run this week too. Like, let's play these guys now. Like,
Yeah, don't be inactive, please. Come on.
the problem is though that Jeff Ulbrich has no incentive to play anybody young. Like, I'm like, can we get Kuntz some reps? Like, let's move on from the Jeremy Ruckert experiment. The guy, I went back and forth with some people on Twitter earlier. Like, I'm not here saying Jeremy Ruckert's great. I'm here saying Jeremy Ruckert, like every other damn offensive player they draft, doesn't develop, gets worse.
Yeah.
Jeremy Ruckert dropped 2 passes in 4 years in college, and then he gets here all of a sudden. He walks into one Jets drive and he can't catch football. This is just what the Jets do. But
I don't know.
Listen, you haven't ruined Zach Kuntz yet, but put him on the field. Give him some targets. Let's get Corley in a game and get him some targets.
And I can't speak obviously to the job that Tony Dews has done, but the running backs show up almost every week, whether it's Brees and Braleon and Isaiah and Brees. Like, there's a combination of 1, 2, all 3 of these guys that show up every single week. So whatever they're doing in that room specifically seems to be working because they're pretty consistent. And like you said, the pass protection has been pretty good. Braleon more so than Isaiah. But Todd Downing even said on that touchdown run by Isaiah Davis that Braleon had a beautiful blind backside block. So even in the run game, they're dogging it out for each other just to get yards. And I love seeing the camaraderie of like when Davis scores and Braleon comes up and, gives them like all the cheers in the world. Like, I love that type of stuff because it shows the tight knit of that room. So I think they've been the bright spot for sure.
And I think they probably see that the team likes them enough that they're going to be teammates for a while and they're both going to get their opportunities.
Yep.
And that's it. It's a new league. The guys aren't 30 carry a week guys. So
Brees hasn't had 20 yards in a game all season.
20 carries.
I think that's wrong. But 20 in a game. He hasn't had 20 carries in a game all season. I think that's wrong, and you should have more than 20 carries if you're Brees.
Yeah.
But now that he's banged up, obviously things are different. But when he was healthy for that little stretch of the season, why aren't you giving him the ball 20, 22, 24 times?
And especially, it was you. You sent that graphic a couple weeks ago, right? When you like teams that are winning are running the ball. Like, running the ball is back in style.
Every single team in the
Jets
playoffs
have 3 running backs and an offensive line that seems to have gotten their act together, but they're not pounding. I mean,
touchdowns passing has gone like this. This for the past 4 seasons, and now it's dropped off. This is the year of the running back, both in college and in the pros. I mean, Saquon Barkley is my pick for MVP. I know he's probably not going to get it. He's my pick. You look at college, Ashton Jeanty is my pick for Heisman. You put Ashton Jeanty on Colorado, and you take Travis Hunter and put him on Boise State. Different outcomes all season.
I like Omarion Hampton though. I think he's my favorite back in the class.
I'm not saying that he has to be everybody's number 1, but I'm just saying in terms of value to their team.
Oh yeah,
Jeanty deserves to be high. It's the year of the running back now, and I love it. I think it's so cool. And the Jets have 3 really good ones that you can hang your hat on and build for the future. So that if your quarterback isn't great out the gates, you have 3 guys behind you, 5 yards there that can just take it and go. And I love that they're developing every week.
All right. So before we wrap things up, we do from time to time like to, pat ourselves on the back a little bit and maybe mention, I like this guy in college and this guy who's playing well was somebody I banged the table for. But we're like everybody else. Sometimes we like guys who are not very good once they get drafted. So maybe it's something we can do every now and then. But I told Dylan, I said, Dylan, pick 3 names of guys that you loved before the draft, the year they were drafted, who just did not pan out in the NFL, despite your full endorsement. So I picked 3 names. Dylan picked a few names. I'll start it off here, Dylan.
Okay.
First guy hasn't been, I mean, he's not out of the league like some of my guys are, but he's just come nowhere close to being the player I thought he would be.
Mhm.
That's wide receiver Rondale Moore. Purdue product. Smallish guy, not smallish, small, well, short, but thick, powerful lower half, tackle breaker, absolute monster in college. He's been a 400 yards per year guy since coming into the league with Arizona. I thought he would be much better than that. It looks like, for me, Rondale Moore, big swing and a miss on the evaluation there.
Yeah, first one up for me, I'm going all the way back to 2021 class. So this is 4 drafts ago now. The Zach Wilson draft, I was so high on Zaven Collins, the edge / linebacker from Tulsa. He ended up going to Arizona. I don't know if he's even on Arizona anymore or on anybody's practice squad. And there's another name in the first round that I don't even want to mention that's probably even worse. But Zaven Collins was somebody that I was pounding the table for, where it's like, no, you keep Sam Darnold, you trade back, and you draft Zaven Collins, baby. That's what you do to save the Jets. So I was completely wrong in that aspect.
Just took a look. This according to Wikipedia, he is still with the Cardinals.
Oof. I wonder if he probably doesn't start. I'll look up his stats as you're going.
It looks, yeah, I don't think he starts because his numbers are quite pedestrian. I'm taking a look now.
Are they Hassan Reddick numbers? Because he starts.
Yeah. No, they're better than Hassan. He actually had 9 tackles against Buffalo.
Wow.
1 TFL. He's got 5 TFLs this season, 5 QB hits. He actually had 100 tackles 2 years ago. I don't remember that.
The quietest 100 tackles ever, yeah.
Yeah, he's just not. That's the thing. Sometimes these guys get 100 tackles, and it's like, it's 6 yards downfield, not really making impact plays. So he's not been the player a lot of guys thought he would be. My next guy is also a linebacker, Dylan. Wyoming linebacker Chad Muma, who had athleticism and speed and motor off the charts. I thought he was going to be an absolute menace in the middle of the field. I thought he was going to impact the run game, the pass game. He's been meh. He's not really. He's been in the league a few years. He doesn't even have 100 tackles yet total. We just talked about Zaven Collins having 100 in year 2. Chad Muma, I mean, he was developmental. He was Wyoming guy, right? But still, 93 tackles in 2-3 years. Not really lighting it up the way I thought he would.
Muma was a top 50 pick too, right?
He may have been.
I think he was like.
I think he
I want to say 44. I don't know why that number's sick. Maybe that's his actual football number, but for some reason, I feel like
that may have been. Let's see. He's in Jacksonville. What was the question? I already forgot.
What number pick was he?
Let's see.
And what number jersey?
No, he was 70th.
70th? Okay. What is his football number on his jersey?
48.
48. Okay.
Maybe he was 44.
That's probably where I got the 40s from, but yeah, maybe he was. But
college stats, no, 48 in college.
Muma was another guy that I liked too. Obviously, small school, but I was high on him. I don't think as high as you were, but yeah, definitely somebody who's underperformed. This guy in the 2022 class for me, another first rounder. I pounded the table hard for this guy. And again, I don't even know if he's in the league on this team. I don't know where he is, but Daxton Hill, baby, where are you? I thought he was going to be the best thing coming out of Michigan as like a slot / safety guy. And he went to Cincinnati, and then all of a sudden they like added pieces at the position that he currently played. And I was like, well, I guess that's his shot, gone. I think the next year, even the Bengals signed or drafted a really high safety that basically took over his spot. And I don't know. I think he's somebody that's completely busted compared to where I thought he was. I thought he was like a top 10 player in that draft class. So I was way wrong on Daxton Hill.
Yeah, honestly, I don't even excuse me, I don't remember him. Name doesn't ring a bell. I was saying to Dylan before we started recording, it is crazy how you'll be 2 or 3 years removed from a draft, and I'll go back and look, and they'll be first-round picks that I don't remember them. I'm like, oh, who is this guy? Clearly that year I would have known because it was a first-round pick, but not a ton. But every now and then I go back and say, Wow, that guy must have really been a bust because I completely forgot his name. Last not least for me, USC running back Keontae Ingram. Now I didn't think he was going to be great, but I thought he was going to be a nice steal. I thought he was going to be a late
Mhm.
rounder who could be a spot starter, productive player. He ended up being, he was a late rounder. He went in the 6th round to the Cardinals, and he has not done much as a pro. It looks like he is currently, well, good for him. He's currently on the Chiefs roster, maybe their practice squad. But he's got 134 yards rushing in 2 years after being, or well, this is his 3rd year after being drafted by Arizona. Has been active for 1 game this year with the Chiefs, and yeah, was not. And I distinctly remember our good friend Emery Hunt reading his scouting report because I like.
Mhm.
I mean, Emery's great, but I like Emery's takes on running backs. He, that's sort of his bread and butter. And whatever the scouting report said, I remember thinking, man, I'm not seeing this the way Emery is. I think he's better than that. And I was wrong. He's not been good at all.
Yeah, I remember like an Ingram too. Tough one. But yeah, like you said, not a high pick. He was like a 6th round pick, you said. So it's not
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it's manageable when you
But
get into those later. But when you think he's like a 2nd or 3rd round pick, and
yeah,
it's like, oh shoot,
I
why
think
did?
I probably thought he was like a 4th rounder.
Yeah.
And no matter where he was drafted, I thought he was going to be a good player. I
Mhm.
was wrong.
All right, last one here for me. It's not a 1st round pick; it's a 3rd round pick. But somebody I watched in Mobile, and I actually liked him a lot more than I liked his brother. And his brother has turned out to be the complete better prospect, better player so far throughout their careers. And that's Sidney Brown, the safety for the Eagles. I think he's been banged up quite a bit, if I'm not mistaken. So it's not entirely like, his fault. There's obviously some luck involved. But I also think what Chase Brown is doing in Cincinnati is just excelling. Even if Sidney Brown was doing okay for the Eagles, I don't think he's healthy right now. So, but yeah, Chase Brown was the better prospect or has had the better career, and I thought it was going to be the complete inverse. I didn't really like Chase Brown at the Senior Bowl. I thought Sidney Brown was doing really good. He was a thumper too. Like those guys came in jacked. They were wearing the crop top jerseys, showing off all their muscles and everything. And I really thought Sidney was going to be it. So it's a miss, but he was a 3rd round pick, so it's not terrible missing in the 3rd round because seems like the Jets do that quite a bit too.
Yeah, well, hey, at least they hit 2nd rounders now because they
No,
missed
yeah,
on those for about 15 years.
I know it's
Um,
tragic.
yeah. What was I going to say? Oh, in case anyone's wondering, I meant to say it at the top. We kind of said we wouldn't do Jets picks because everyone knows who we liked in the Jets draft. Like
Yeah.
Zach Wilson should have been on mine if we were including Jets picks.
Mhm.
But we did
Jordan
not.
Battle is the guy that the Cincinnati Bengals drafted in 2023 after drafting Dax Hill in the 1st round, and Jordan Battle has been their starting safety ever since, I believe.
Okay, interesting stuff. So we'll wrap this one up. That is the Jets GM candidates as per Zach Rosenblatt and the Athletic. Some names on there we liked, some names on there we didn't. Just anyone attached to salary cap. Or who started their journey
Yeah.
as a salary cap person. Not interested. That's just me. Everyone's gonna have different priorities. That'll wrap this one up. Have a good one, Jets fans.